Good afternoon, everyone. I think blockchain is a key enabler of innovation and disintermediation. And if we look back for about a century of technological development, we've been doubling processing power and enabling more and more every year, or every 2 years even. But if we want to end up in this specific section where we see convergence of things like artificial intelligence and drones and robotics and everything, we will need an underlying layer that enables trust and the exchange of value, especially for things like self-driving cars, for autonomous drones, perhaps your microgrid that you have at home, smart homes that may be controlled with your smartphone, artificial intelligence to control it all, smart appliances and smart entertainment. This needs to exchange value at some point in time. Right now we live and we have an internet of copies and information. If I share information with the internet, it will end up everywhere. I think that's as clear as it is. But if I take a photo, for example, that I want to share with either one of you, it's very easy. I can send you an email or a message or find another way to send it to you. But in essence, I'm creating a copy. It is not the transfer of value that I'm working on here. And that's great if it's about a photo, but if it's about money, I really want to make very sure that if I send you money, that I don't retain another copy of it. And that's why assets need a very different approach in the internet of value. So assets think about not only money, but also think about certificates, carbon trading, for example. Think about stocks, bonds, or anything digital, basically, that you really want to exchange, that you just don't want to share, but that has a certain value attached to it. And right now, we're solving this problem by using middlemen. So all these different participants in this network work with this one middleman, normally covered by a brand that everyone likes and trusts, and therefore entrusts with their certain transaction. And so if Bob wants to have a transaction with Jane, they go via this middleman and make sure that, and the middleman basically make sure that all the mechanics are in place and that this eventually works. Of course, in the process, there's a little fee that such a middleman takes, but that's not the only problem. So one of the things is that we are trusting banks, for example, for safekeeping our money, for the accurate and timely transfer of our transactions, and also for loans. And this is a middleman function because the money comes from someone else and is lent to someone else, right? We are trusting Uber to have a reliable driver and for the driver to have a reliable passenger, that the payment will arrive eventually. We are trusting companies like Airbnb, that the apartment is as it is described on the internet, that there are no damages for the landlord, and that there's also like payment for the services that are being taken out. We're also trusting charities for the distribution of the money that we entrust them with, that this actually ends up in the right place at the right time, that they keep their cost base to the minimum, and also that you know what you're paying for. So these middlemen, they do have a certain function, right? They enable these transactions, but there are also certain problems with it. For example, many of these middlemen take a lot of value out of this chain without delivering a whole lot back, because they may have a certain monopoly position. They may be vulnerable to hacks. There's a lot of aggregated information, sometimes aggregated money as well, and that's a really high reward target for any kind of perpetrator. Things may slow down through these middlemen. Why does a transaction need to take 7 days, even if it is from the other side of the world, if it is through these banks? And these middlemen are capturing our data, basically understanding more about what we do, and we will not be able to monetize and to use that data later on anymore. And in that process, they also undermine our privacy. And one of the last problems is that they also act as a gatekeeper, right? There are billions of people that are unbanked these days because they perhaps don't have enough money, basically keeping them away from participating in this new economy that we're creating together. So what we need is an internet of value, where like different participants, different peers, can actually exchange this money peer-to-peer without the need of a middleman. And for trade, you need trust. And how are we going to enable this without the use of these middlemen? So here's an idea. What if we make all participants equal? We put all transactions on an immutable list. We give all participants a copy of the very same list. And we give everyone the possibility to verify these transactions. And we make it economically unviable to cheat the system. Now, obviously, this is not my idea, but there's a person or a group of persons called Satoshi Nakamoto that a little over 10 years ago came up with a white paper about Bitcoin. Now that white paper, and so we can't trust this middleman basically, because we don't know who he is, but the work that he's been working on has been verified by a lot of people. So cryptographically, mathematically, that's actually sound. This is the white paper. This is publicly available. And in this white paper is described how you can actually transact from one person to the other person in a peer-to-peer electronic cash system without the use of middleman. Basically making all these participants equal players, right? They can transact directly with each other. BlockChain is also called the distributed ledger technology, and the reason for that is that all these transactions are recorded on a distributed ledger. In other words, every participant in the network has access and has a copy of this ledger of all the transactions. So once a new transaction is being generated on a blockchain-like system, that needs to be included in a block, and that block is added to the blockchain. So once a miner, a certain person that creates these new blocks, has solved a certain cryptographic puzzle and included it in a block, the block will be distributed throughout that network between all these different nodes. Basically from one node, from one side, they communicate it to the next nodes next to them, and this way it is distributed throughout the whole network. Then the blocks, once received, they are verified and linked together, and that's basically what the blockchain stands for. And also these blocks are being time-stamped, and that's a very interesting property because of that timestamp, you're able to verify or basically prove in the future that you have knowledge of certain information right now or in the past. The whole system is open source. The programming code is available to everyone to inspect and to basically make sure that everyone is playing by the rules, that the system cannot be gamed. And it is also based on consensus. So the acceptance of these new blocks with new transactions, and therefore there's those transactions, as well as the software updates to the system, is something that needs at least 50% of the network to agree with that. So effectively, we're moving from a centralized system with centralized control, such as a situation where we have banks, to a distributed system where everyone has a democratic, similar position. No one is the main person, there's no authority in the network, everything is distributed. But the information, therefore, is centralized, goes the other way around. We're breaking down these information silos and we go to one version of the truth. And that is basically something that has a lot of advantages in today's world and enabling the new economy and new technology. So then there are newer versions of blockchain, such as Aetherium was the first and foremost one, that came up with smart contracts. Now, smart contracts are neither smart nor real contracts, but they have a certain programmable logic, so certain actions can be executed based on what is actually happening on that blockchain. They can be self-executing. They could be compared in certain circumstances. With a running train, you're not going to stop it. So even if you want to stop it, it's not possible anymore unless you build in a deadman switch. And you can enable asset-based automations. For example, in supply chain, this is very interesting. Products are identified when they are created or found or sourced. And throughout the supply chain, the whole shipping track, the conditions are being monitored. For example, for temperature or for shocks or whatever that is. Once the good change hands, also the ownership on the chain, and therefore the payment is activated through these smart contracts. And it is, for example, only paid when these specific temperature conditions are being met. Think about voting, where we have a much more transparent situation, and we can cryptographically prove that certain votes were received by certain people in the election, and it can be done from anywhere. So anyone could log in online and basically go through this online without needing to be somewhere. Land registry is a very interesting example, which is key to economic mobility. If we want people to grow and prosper, we need to make sure that they have a valid title of their lands. And in certain countries, there is a little bit of a problem around repossession of lands. So once we register this on an immutable chain, it can also be used to borrow against, and this provide a lot of protection against perhaps a dictator that comes by one day and wants to, give the land to someone else. And digital identity is one of my favorite cases, where basically through self-sovereign identity that lives on your phone, and is verified by other authorities, for example, the government or a bank or whatever, on the blockchain, you can prove that the information on your phone is true, and you can also choose to release this information on a base of need to know. For example, a club only needs to know that I'm over 18, doesn't need to know my date of birth or my birthday, or even how old I am. And actually, digital identity or self-sovereign identity is very, very central to all these use cases that we're looking at blockchain. This enables registries, provenance, value transfer, supply chain voting, certificate trading, and so forth. So this is one of the big problems that need to be solved, and there's some very interesting solutions out there right now already. And then if we want to enable machine economy and basically convergence of all these different technologies, AI, IoT, blockchain, that we're looking at, and we perhaps in the future don't only want to interact with a machine as a full participant, as a supplier in the economy, but perhaps also as a consumer in the economy. Perhaps a machine needs energy and can autonomously pay for that in the future. But then we need to align all these technologies to work together. So the current state of blockchain, in my mind, is we are kind of like past all these scams, the Bitcoin that was used for Silk Road, the ICO hypes, pump and dump schemes, exchange hacks, crypto winter. And right now, we are really building real-world products and use cases and developing next-generation scalable blockchain solutions. The future, in my mind, has to do with solving mass adoption. Blockchain is difficult, and we need to deliver real value, think about privacy, and also enable the machine-to-machine economy. In Deloitte's 2019 Global Blockchain Survey that just came out a couple of days ago, they have a couple of very interesting facts. So the respondents said that blockchain technology is broadly scalable and will eventually achieve mainstream adoption. 86% of the respondents agreed with this statement. 53% of respondents say that blockchain technology has become a critical priority for their organization in 2019. 10% agrees over last year. And to me, that shows that we are really going towards this real use case adoption and real blockchain adoption. There's certainly some problems left, such as at whatever moment you'll be re-centralizing again, for example, at an exchange or during an ICO or whatever that may be. There is, of course, always a problem around making this a very interesting target for hackers and making it very economically interesting to challenge such systems. Of course, there are regulatory problems. Certain jurisdictions are catching up rather fast, others not so fast. And the main problems are around financial regulation, anti-money laundering in cryptocurrencies, and also around privacy regulation. And then we think about the adoption. I think that is a key point as well, where the user experience is still difficult. You need to be a little bit of an expert, at least know what you're doing, because if you lose your key, your Bitcoin is gone, for example. I'm involved in solving two of these problems. On the one side, on the regulatory side, in GDPR and privacy consulting for deep tech companies. And on the other side, with a non-for-profit member-led association, BerChain, where we're connecting players and promoting blockchain in Berlin. And on that note, Joe Lubin, who is the the CEO of the biggest blockchain incubator and consultancy in the world, called Consensus. They named Berlin as the most important city in the blockchain cosmos. Going further in that, like, this is an overview which needs to be updated, but gives a bit of an idea how many companies are out there. And right now we have well over 100 blockchain-based startups here in Berlin. And there are also certain system enablers, the corporates that have their innovation labs, co-working spaces, hardware mining companies, media, and so forth and so on, that we are keeping track of, and that we feel is very, very important, and actually makes Berlin the blockchain capital in my mind. So with BerChain, we're connecting those players in Berlin, connecting with industry, academics, investors, Mittelstand, politics, and also promote Berlin as a blockchain capital. And for me, as a closing note, blockchain enables the future by providing the underlying structure for the new economy and innovation. Thank you.